in all three cases, at least 40% said this is the, or should be the top priority. Moving down that list, climate change. We've got the COP conference starting later this week. Making housing more affordable gets another third. Now, if you go down on that list, these are still priorities for many people, but they're not signaled as the top priority. Reducing the federal budget deficit, improving Canada's economic competitiveness, dealing with labor shortages in many sectors, Indigenous reconciliation, and then implementing the National Childcare Program. Again, not the top priority for as many people, but when you actually look into these numbers, many people still say this is a high priority, just not the most important. So expect to see, or if the government's reacting to public opinion, expect to see, healthcare, getting more people vaccinated, and the cost of living high up on the government's agenda.
And it's already signaled that's the way it's going to be in early days of the new parliament. So you touched on a focus of Canadians still on healthcare, beating back the pandemic. Let's look at where voter support is now for each of the federal parties. What's changed since the election nearly 40 days ago?
Well, not a whole lot. We have the Conservatives behind the Liberals now. They won the popular vote just barely in the election. So you got the Liberals at 33, up 1 point. The Conservatives are down 4 points from the share of the vote they got in the election. Maybe a signal of some of the challenges it's had around vaccinations and its MPs and what position the party's taking. I think that's creating some friction. The New Democrats are at 19%. The overall picture is, except for that dip in Conservative support, we might expect, not a lot has changed in who Canadians would vote only a month after they had that chance to vote.
And so does that reflected, let's quickly look at the regions too, because we like to do that. That story told in the regions as well.
Pretty much. BC's still a close three-way race. The prairies are solid for the Conservatives. Ontario's got a 10-point lead for the Liberals. Quebec is a close race between the Bloc and the Liberals, and Atlantic Canada remains solid for the Liberals. So the regional races are what we saw in the last election. They're what we saw headed into that election, and that all creates still a very competitive political system as this government gets sworn in.
Let's finish on that. How do you think the findings of this survey will be reflected, could be reflected in the focus of the government and the new cabinet, and that sort of starts today now? These are the men and women who are going to be the face of driving policy, driving change, driving this agenda. How do you think these numbers in your survey will be reflected there?
Well, I think, the government will look at these numbers and say, the public is not, overly anxious about the direction the country's going, right? There's some optimism, at least perhaps some cautious optimism, but that doesn't take away from the fact that people are feeling anxious about the rising cost of living and inflation, about, capacity of the healthcare system to come out, to not just deal with the pandemic as it goes forward, but to build out of it, and the broader economic uncertainty that's around everything. And so I think, this cabinet will be tasked with a lot of work. And I think the people who were selected are going to be because that work needs to be done, and the public has high expectations and worries about the issues that this new parliament's going to have to deal with.
All right, David Coletto, as always, thanks for your perspective, and we'll watch what happens in the days ahead. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Peter.
All right, as our coverage continues here on CPAC, we're continuing now to watch. Let's look at this is Helena Jasic making her way up to Rideau Hall. Now, she's a former Ontario cabinet minister, so she is headed for the federal cabinet here as one of those newly elected Liberals in Ontario. She will find a place at the cabinet table. We've also seen coming in the last number of minutes Patty Hajdu, who was the Minister of Health. There's Jonathan Wilkinson, who is the current Minister of Environment, but widespread speculation that that post ends today, but clearly will be occupying another position in cabinet. A lot of people suggesting that he may end up as the Minister of Natural Resources. So you'd have this 1-2 sort of combination on the climate file in Stephen Guilbeault and Jonathan Wilkinson, to deal with the Liberal government's promise of major progress on the climate change file. We saw Sean Fraser coming in from Nova Scotia, widespread expectation he would be named to cabinet. Saw him and a young family making their way to Rideau Hall, so he is going to cabinet. He was the Parliamentary Secretary to the Finance Minister in the last Parliament. We saw Carolyn Bennett. Lots of speculation that her role will be ending on the file involving the relationship between the federal government and Indigenous communities, that she'll be moved to something else. So we'll watch to see if that's the case. We saw Mary Claude Bibeau going back to cabinet. Ahmed Hassan was the Minister of Families in the last Parliament. A lot of speculation that this government may be headed towards creating a new, given the anxiety in the land and what's been happening in the housing market, a new Ministry of Housing. So we'll see if that happens today. And there's Carla Qualtrough from British Columbia. She's going back to cabinet. No surprise there, I don't think. And we'll see which others as we continue to watch. Let's bring in our party commentators again. Susan Smith, we heard David Coletto talk about this is the kind of cabinet that needs to move forward this Liberal agenda put before Canadians in the election. It occurs to me it's largely going to be done with what we've seen. Yes, there's some new faces, but it's largely going to be the same cabinet as we saw last time. So talk to me about moving that agenda forward with the people around that table. Oh, there we go. Oh, okay, we're back.
Sorry about that. There you go. Mute the story of COVID. By my count, there are 7 new faces to help the Prime Minister with the other experienced members at the cabinet table. I'm thrilled to see some of those faces at the table. Sean Fraser from Nova Scotia, as deserved his post. Dr. Helena Jasek, who just recently lost her husband, so a bit sad to see her walking up there by herself. That's very fresh. She's a former Minister of Health at the provincial level. So some really competent new faces at the table and some significant experience as well with the others. Climate change, childcare, COVID economic recovery, affordable housing, big issues for the Prime Minister, many that deal with the provinces, some experienced hands, some affable people, some capable negotiators. I think, as always, there's been a great bench to draw from the Prime Minister. Randy Boissonnault with his business background. So it'll be a very, very, I think the Prime Minister is well equipped with his team to achieve the objectives that he's been elected to achieve.
There's Bill Blair, Minister of Public Safety in the last Parliament and the last ministry. Not clear that that's the position he will continue to hold in this cabinet, but we'll know that in the next half hour or so. The process set to get underway in the next 10 minutes or so. Tim, what are your thoughts on the people you've seen making their way into Rideau Hall so far, and what that tells us about the kind of approach to moving the agenda forward this Prime Minister wants to take?
Well, I was thinking to my friend Seamus O'Regan. He's probably got every finger and toe crossed. Peter, hoping he's not the Minister of Fisheries, but we'll soon see. That's a tough portfolio in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Sorry to jump in, Tim. This is Goody Hutchins, I think, from Newfoundland.
That's not a surprise in a way. I heard Susan say, "Oh," but Susan will well know that Goody Hutchins, who's from the Corner Brook area of Newfoundland and Labrador, is a very talented MP. She's well regarded by her colleagues. She's done some great work on infrastructure. I believe she was the Parliamentary Affairs Minister for Infrastructure, Parliamentary Secretary, I should say, for infrastructure. She comes from the tourism sector. It gets back to the issue of the Prime Minister having a gender balanced cabinet, and certainly in Goody Hutchins, he has a very capable performer there. This will be the first time then, Peter, since 1979, Joe Clark's minority, that there have been 2 Newfoundlanders and Labradorians in the cabinet. Also a bit of a signal, I think, to Atlantic Canada, and Newfoundland and Labrador will be interpreted that way. Anyway, the fondness that the Prime Minister has for the region.
Tim, you can't have too many Newfoundlanders in cabinet, can you?
Well, Peter, I mean, the whole government should be run by Newfoundlanders. I mean, God, come on, we'd be in much better shape. But back to your other point.
Just while I jumped in, there's Omar Al-Gabra, who was the transport minister. He's one of those ministers that could very likely, having recently assumed the portfolio, it would make sense if he just continued in that job. But we'll see what happens when the swearing in takes place. Sorry, Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, look, Dominic LeBlanc, Seamus, some of those experienced hands make sense, because the reality here is, yes, the Prime Minister has, as Susan suggested, a collective mandate with the NDP, with the Conservatives, with the Greens to move forward. But if he's really going to do things and get it done in a minority, I think history's shown us it's the first year. So whatever he wants to achieve, he's going to have to put all these ministers to task to do as much as they can in the first year, because after that first year in a minority, with certain exceptions, it gets really difficult. So hearing his remarks afterwards, seeing what his ministers say, will signal, I think, the pace which they intend to take when they start in their offices today.
All right, I think that's Diane Leboutillier, the Minister of National Revenue in the last Parliament, coming up for the swearing-in ceremony and acknowledging the cameras there. Kim Wright, let me hear you, because a lot of this, New Democrats have said, that the Liberals should not rely on the same kind of support they had from New Democrats in the last Parliament, which was that they would not trigger a confidence vote while we were in a pandemic. Jagmeet Singh is saying that won't be the case necessarily this time. So there'll be a lot of attention paid to who the men and women of this cabinet are, with a view to how they move an agenda forward in terms of cooperation in a minority parliament. So in what you've seen so far, talk to me about that.
So it will depend on which portfolios these folks are put into. But ultimately, what New Democrats have said, and frankly, what Canadians have said, is the performative, the theater, the take a knee one day on Black Lives Matter and human rights, and then continue to take Indigenous kids to court. Those types of things are tiresome. They don't help Canadians. They don't help instill confidence in government, and they certainly don't help instill confidence from parliamentarians across the board. So we're looking to see who are the folks that will be in cabinet, what will be the role, how much latitude are they going to be given by the Prime Minister's office, how much do they want to work with parliamentarians from across the spectrum, as well as stakeholders. And I think if you're actually wanting to move an agenda forward, I think there's lots of common ground to be found. But if it's just going to be theatrics, then no, there's really no interest in that sort of thing from New Democrats, and that's what we're seeing. And frankly, I'll look to Bill Blair as being an example of that. He wants to talk about guns and all of that, but in the city of Toronto, there were 10 shootings on the weekend. 10. We have a guns and gangs problem that continues to be ignored. So all of these things are the types of things, we're not talking about this from an activist perspective. It's just, how do we actually move on these things? And that's what we need.
This is, we're going to come back to to all of you. I think perhaps at least one more quick time here before the ceremony begins, but this is Harjit Sajjan making his way up the walkway here. And we just saw a quick shot of him, I think. 34. This, I'm going to, I can't really see very well with the masking, but there are a lot of speculation about Pascal Saint-Onge, the cultural union leader in Quebec, and I think this may be Pascal Saint-Onge making her way up, masked, and that's Harjit Sajjan. In terms of the process, these ministers know, this is, so for viewers watching, there's no surprise to them about what's about to happen. They've been informed by the Prime Minister, they've been told what their new roles will be, in all likelihood no later than this past weekend. So they're fully aware of what's taking place today and what their new portfolios will be. And some of them are staying, some of them are changing, and some of them are brand new. Let's go back to my colleague Martin Stringer now, who's standing by with some colleagues from the Parliamentary Press Gallery. Martin, go ahead as we continue to watch some of these soon-to-be sworn-in cabinet ministers and newcomers, some returning veteran MPs to Rideau Hall. What are you watching there?
Okay, thank you, Peter. I'm joined right now by Marika Walsh from the Globe and Mail and Janet Silver from iPolitics. And we are watching as people file in this very, very rainy day. Marika Walsh, what are you watching for particularly? I'm asking this of all of our journalist guests here. What are you watching for?
Well, we're seeing certainly so far a lot of new faces joining cabinet, walking by. But I think when we're looking forward for the Liberal Party, I'm looking at where the potential leadership contenders land within this cabinet. We've seen the Prime Minister give a lot of platform a lot of spotlight to Chrystia Freeland. And so how do they juggle that with other contenders like François-Philippe Champagne or Mélanie Joly? So I think that will be something to watch, because that's going to be an internal dynamic in their own right that they'll have to manage in the next few years.
And of course, Harjit Sajjan, we do know that he's no longer defense minister. Significant?
Absolutely significant. And I think it's noteworthy. This has been a problem. This has hung on the Liberal government for months and months and months now, almost a year. And it is very noteworthy that a former military man himself is now being moved out. We reported that last night. We don't yet know where exactly he will land, but we'll learn very soon. But certainly, you know, it really is an admission from the Liberal government that that has not been well managed, that they do need a refresh on that. And the question will be who gets that, you know, maybe a promotion in a sense because it's a defense file, but not an easy job next.
Janet, what are you watching for particularly?
Just to pick up what Marika was talking about in terms of some of the new faces, who are some of the new women that are coming in? We know going into this, the results of the election, 3 women weren't able to keep their seats, cabinet ministers. One had stepped down before, which is Catherine McKenna. So I'm interested to see who the new women are particularly coming in and what roles they're going to be taking on.
Yeah, we saw Pascal Saint-Onge from Quebec walking in, so we know that she's a newcomer from Quebec and a new woman in cabinet. You also hail from and pay particular attention to the Nova Scotia and the Atlantic provinces. You're looking at stories there.
Exactly. We saw earlier on Sean Fraser walk in, so we know he's on the cabinet. Be interesting to see where he goes, and a return to cabinet, if you will, for Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor. She was former health minister, was taken aside, if you will, or taken out of cabinet, and be interested to see, she's arrived here today, what her new responsibilities will be in this cabinet.
Some people have speculated about Jenica Atlin, the floor crosser who went to the Liberals. Any insight on that?
Well, look, there's a lot of division in Fredericton, which is where she hails from, when she crossed the floor, leaving the Greens, going to the Liberals, in terms of some of the comments that were made with regards to the Israeli-Palestinian question. It ruffled some feathers within the Liberal caucus that she was crossing over to their floor. I think it would have been very difficult for them to put her in cabinet, given that history.
Marika, other things you're watching for?
Yeah, just to pick up on that, it's hard to reward a floor crosser when you need to reward your backbenchers first, especially in the third mandate. I think certainly when you're looking at the Prime Minister's agenda, the changes in environment and natural resources that we reported at the Globe and Mail last night are very notable. It's part of the Prime Minister's first trip this week to go to the international climate talks. And he'll have Stephen Guilbeault and Jonathan Wilkinson with him. How industry responds to Stephen Guilbeault, who is a much more activist viewed person on the climate file, versus Jonathan Wilkinson, who's seemed to take a more managerial approach, although he has also really said that climate is the reason why he's in government, I think really shows that they want to really put a stamp on the climate change file. How they'll do that, how Stephen Guilbeault will execute, given the challenges he had in Heritage, is a big question for me. He did not prove himself to be able to execute on complex files. And so maybe now that he's in his comfort zone of environment, that changes, but certainly a big task for him.
The government's big priorities, obviously, and we saw it during the election, housing, affordability, health transfers that are coming up. How are they going to address any of those big ticket, those major topics in this cabinet shuffle? Or what are you watching for?
Well, just to pick up on one thing, though, that Marika was saying in terms of some of the other big files, Indigenous will be a big one to see who gets put in terms of Crown relations, and the other one that will be really interesting to see, where, if Sajjan is in cabinet, where does he go? Also, another big file will be one to watch is fisheries as well, because there's a lot of problems on both coasts on that area. In terms of some of those big files, it'll be the next few weeks to see where they're going to land in terms of their campaign promises, how they're moving forward. In terms of housing affordability, Indigenous, that's a huge problem that the Prime Minister faces.
Health transfers, that's really in the purview of 2 ministers at once, because what they're looking at is interprovincial relations, intergovernmental relations. And you had Dominique Leblanc, who was assuming that role, as well as the health minister, whoever it's going to be after this shuffle.
Well, we know that the challenges with interprovincial relations won't get easier. We're still in the midst of a pandemic. We know that the government and the premier, have had to work much more closely together. So it will be interesting to see who the Prime Minister puts not just in health and in intergovernmental affairs, but also, of course, we know finance. That's also going to have a big hand in terms of managing health transfers negotiating childcare agreements. We know Chrystia Freeland is there, so it's the other puzzle pieces of who will be the lead negotiators, the lead managers of that provincial relationship where so many of the governments are conservative or right-leaning.
And just an interesting sidebar in all of this. Today is the day that we're going to get the results for the Alberta referendum on equalization payments. We know that the majority, the results that we've heard so far, the majority want some sort of deliberation on that. So it's going to be a very tricky file at the same time while Quebec is saying, look, you got to give us more on the health transfer. So how do they manage that? It's and who do they make responsible for that?
It's interesting because yesterday Jason Nixon, the House Leader for the Jason Kenney government, said expect this week a motion from the legislature in response to that municipal referendum.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how seriously they take it. It's not just Alberta gets to decide when we change the Constitution. I think what's very interesting to look at with this government and with the Prime Minister is that in a third mandate, with a status quo election result, or essentially status quo, they are making big changes in this cabinet. They are really overhauling some key portfolios and reshuffling the deck, not always just on new people coming in, but changing the portfolios for people. I think that says that they really do think that they need a rethink and a reset on their key priorities and on ensuring they actually implement and deliver on those big promises.
Some people said a large cabinet shuffles allows the Prime Minister to, in a way, have the light cast in a different direction than difficult decisions he's had to make. His only defense minister, who's ever been there for 6 years, Harjit Sajjan, the woman who started in the Indigenous portfolio, Carolyn Bennett, all the potential of those moves, they're difficult decisions to make when the Prime Minister is stuck by those people until now.
Yeah, we don't know yet where Carolyn Bennett will land. We know she walked up here, so she's still in cabinet. We don't know what exactly will happen. But certainly I think it is an admission, and it's a long time coming, I think, that there have been problems in some of these files, and one I think that the Prime Minister has been loath to acknowledge until now.
There were, Jenna, talk to me about newcomers to the cabinet. You mentioned Sean Fraser, and there's that whole dynamic about how do you get new people into the cabinet and how many people do you disappoint who are not chosen as a newcomer. There was a lot of support behind Sean Fraser, but there were also a lot of suggestions. For example, a newly elected woman in Halifax. There was a lot of suggestions of other newcomers from, say, Atlantic Canada.
Sean Fraser, though, has been one that has, some would argue, has done he's slugged it out. That's right. He's been parliamentary secretary. He's always rocked up and taken the questions and has delivered. And he's very popular in his riding. Another new person that's walked by today is Marcy Ian, former co-host on Canada AM, has performed. Some would argue she did a fairly good job on heritage during, the whole Bill C-10. So, they are being rewarded. She's Toronto Centre. It's a stronghold for them. So, yes, some of those newcomers will be, and Randy Boissonneau, another one who has walked here today, to see how they perform. Now, he is a return MP, but it will be interesting to see where they go from here. Okay. Well, both of you, listen, I want to thank you very much for your thoughts. And I know we're just seconds away from the opening of the actual swearing in. Thanks for speaking with us.
Thank you.
And Peter, that was Marika Walsh from the Globe and Mail and Janet Silver from iPolitics. Back to you, Peter. All right, thanks, Martin. We'll continue to watch as soon as the ceremony officially gets underway there, we can see family members and guests gathered. Susan Smith, let me have you pick up on some of the points we heard from our journalist colleagues here about these major changes we expect to see today, particularly in defense and environment, in ministers with relationships with reconciliation in Indigenous communities. The suggestion that this is an acknowledgement that what's been happening inside the government, the way they've been approaching these files, hasn't been working, and there needs to be changes made, and the Prime Minister gets that. Talk to me about that. I think change is a good thing. Prime Ministers frequently shuffle their cabinets. This Prime Minister has not done large wholesale shuffles on a that's not been his mark. So obviously we discussed it's time for change at defense, I think. And defense is more than just dealing with the morale of the troops. That's critical. Defense is procurement. Defense is our position in the world. Defense is, Arctic sovereignty, all of these things. So if it ends up in the capable hands of Anita Anand or another capable minister, I think that's a very good move. Big agenda items like with Indigenous affairs and so on, you've still got, what you don't lose at the cabinet table is the experience. Whether the ministers change portfolios or not, they all sit on cabinet committees, they all speak to one another.
And so I think the government benefits at times from changing the perspective of who's leading the department, but also you never lose the full skill.
Okay, Tim, if major changes are being made, which we expect, to these portfolios, what does it say about the Prime Minister's assessment of how these issues have been handled to this point?
That they need new invigoration, that they could be improved. Look, I think what'll be interesting again, Peter, is the Prime Minister's comments post the cabinet shuffle. It does look like there's going to be a lot of change. So the first message is there needed to be change will be the interpretation of that. Susan's put a positive spin on that as is normal, to suggest it's because they have the talent to do all of that. After 6 years, yeah, you do need some change. I think the challenge the Prime Minister is going to have is not overstating this either. His biggest vulnerability seems to be inflating expectations. That is what has got him in a lot of trouble on the Indigenous reconciliation front, other than trips to Tofino. He's gone further perhaps, and he's passionate about the subject than he should, and he's let leaders down. So whether Mark Miller takes on that role or not, it's going to be about expectation management, and the Prime Minister is going to want to get that right. And I think he's also going to want to signal again in his comments, which we will all be looking for, where he's going to go on areas of common ground, like housing. We've heard a lot about housing today. It's been a central issue in the campaign. So be watching for all of that, not just the changing of the ministers.
Kim, let me hear you on this, and changes to these major portfolios where some ministers have been there since this government was elected in some cases. What does that tell us?
Yeah, I'm looking to, and there's a song lyric of, here's the new boss, same as the old boss. Is it really that? Is it just shuffling the headshots of the minister in charge? Or are they actually going to get to work and make meaningful movement on these things? And part of that, Tim's quite right, the signals we will see coming out of the Prime Minister in his speech, how people have been rewarded, promoted, moved forward. What was this election we just went through all about? And what are meaningful changes look like from an affordability standpoint? There's a lot that's on the plate of this government, as there is with any government. There is a ticking clock off onto the side. There's also, how do you manage potential people who might want the Prime Minister's job within that caucus and within that cabinet? So managing all of those things, the politics of it, we'll talk about for the days and weeks to come. Ultimately today, the Prime Minister needs to get out of the gate saying, this is the tone I want to set. These are the things that matter. And it's actually going to have meaningful movement, not just here's the headline, but goodness, not a lot of change.
So we'll continue to keep an eye on the, as soon as this ceremony starts, we'll take you there. Susan, there have been some suggestions that it really doesn't matter who these ministers are. The whole ministry is run by the PMO. And so they just follow, they carry out instructions. So let me hear you on that.
So Peter, I'm a little frustrated. I think Kim is fantastic. I'm a little frustrated at the constant suggestion that this is just window dressing and headlines. These ministers run complex portfolios for the government of Canada. They put things in place like carbon strategies. They negotiate things like childcare deals. They work on things like boil water advisories. It's not complete. It's not fixed. But to suggest that everything this government has done or will continue to do is window dressing is absolute nonsense. So let's just put that aside, or let's just put that there, okay? The Prime Minister, we've seen the faces that are going to be in this cabinet. I think it's going to be a very exciting cabinet. Some of these ministers have negotiated trade deals. These trade deals need to be implemented. We have COVID economic recovery that has to happen. We have ministers that have gotten vaccines into the arm, helped get the vaccines into the country that then get into the arms of Canadians through intergovernmental negotiations with our premiers. So these ministers will run their portfolios. Of course, there is some oversight from the Prime Minister's office in the sense that you need government to run in sync with one another. You don't put a bunch of hockey players on the ice and tell them just to go do their own thing. There are some plays, there are some systems, there are some things you practice, and guess what? There's a coach. So that's the way government works. But it takes one person to put the puck in the net, but someone's got to pass the puck.
Tim, let me hear you on this, because that's been one of the suggestions about the Trudeau government, is that it really doesn't matter who the cabinet ministers are. I mean, it always matters, but They're simply carrying out orders from the PMO. So who's really leading the file on reconciliation? Is it the minister, and are ideas coming up from the ministry, or are they coming down from PMO? And this was the same. Let's be clear. This was the same allegation made against the Harper government too. So,
and against the Chrétien government, and against the Martin government. I mean, there is truth in that in every government. Look, the Prime Minister's office will take a central role in key files. That is normal. It should not be surprising to anybody that happens. It's the degree of control that varies, and I think that varies with time. Look, I agree with Susan. There are competent ministers there: Freeland, LeBlanc, Anand, O'Regan, Bill Blair. But again, and you saw this perhaps best exemplified by Jody Wilson-Raybould, where it's navigating that tension. What does the Prime Minister want to have happen? And how are his ministers making progress? Is this a file that the Prime Minister's as interested in? Sometimes the Prime Ministers aren't as interested in particular files because there are lots of them in government. The ministers can have greater autonomy. They can succeed or they can fail based on how they exercise that autonomy. So this is a normal tension. I think, though, with this particular cabinet, I don't see a lessening of the Prime Minister's office's involvement, particularly, look, if the speculation is out there that this may be the Prime Minister's last term. I think in the portfolios that he's interested in, where he wants legacy items, be they on childcare, be they on GHGs and environmental management and stewardship, be they Indigenous affairs, he's going to play a more active role. That is normal. The other thing to watch again now with this cabinet, Peter, playing off that speculation is, and Marika mentioned this, individual ministerial posturing that happens as they assume their boss may be moving off, and how that impacts governing. Susan and I and Kim have lived through that before in different governments. It can make for good government or it can make for bad government, and a lot of headlines.
Kim, let me hear you on that. Susan says, look, it's not always window dressing. And let me have you respond to her.
So look, there are lots of good things that every government does. I am a fierce optimist. You can't spend 30 years in politics and not be an optimist, especially on the day everyone gets the new notebooks and the new pencils, and we're out there. But the proof will be in the pudding of this. And what does the first 100 days look like? How do we move forward on reconciliation, meaningful reconciliation? How do we actually get housing built and not just finger pointing? Those are the things that Canadians are looking for. They're looking to this government for. They're looking to the ministers for. And I think that will be where they are judged in 18 months or 2 years or 3 years when we're back at the polls again. That's how this works. But ultimately, how we want to get forward, like the last 6 years there's been some movement, but not nearly enough, and not just for the activists who want it all, but just for people who want to not have a clean drinking water continue to be a problem in communities in Canada. That should not continue to happen to this day.
All right, as we continue to watch for the beginning of the swearing-in ceremony of the new cabinet. This is the ballroom at Rideau Hall. As you see, we're getting very close to the beginning, we are told, where we will have the swearing-in ceremony of what we've seen simply by virtue of the people entering, a mix of largely older or remaining members of cabinet moved into different positions, but some new faces. I think we saw 6, 7, or 8 new MPs, ministers to be, making their way into Rideau Hall, and that ceremony is set to begin shortly. So just as a point of explanation, what you'll see happen is in terms of the oaths taken, so existing ministers who are staying in the same jobs are simply presented to the Governor General. They don't have to take a new oath. Ministers changing portfolios, who are already in the cabinet but changing portfolios, take an oath of that new portfolio. And then the newbies, as some will call them, they do the oath of the Privy Council. They do first they do the allegiance to the Queen, the oath of the Privy Council, and then the oath of the portfolio they're assuming. So you will see different kinds of oaths taken by different ministers, depending on what job they are holding in the new cabinet, as we continue with our coverage. And Susan, let me ask you about You know, there were a lot of potential new faces the Prime Minister could have picked from this election. And how's the decision made to choose the ones he does?
I might have a little peek at what's happening, Peter, here. The Prime Minister makes his decision based on skill and lived and life experience. He looks at regional diversity, looks at gender diversity. He looks at, does this cabinet look like the face of Canada? And he, again, looks at what are the big problems I have and who are the best people that can solve these problems. Language skills, everything like that. So I've just had a little peek at who's in what position, and I think people are going to be very excited when they see these portfolios as they're announced.
We're still waiting for that the list to be made public as the swearing-in ceremony begins here. Tim, talk to me about that. About you know, looking across the breadth of your new caucus. What are the kinds of things that help you determine which of those newcomers deserves a place at the cabinet table?
Well, I think loyalty also matters too. I mean, the Prime Minister wants to know that he can work with these people, but they will be loyal and possess a fidelity towards the government. He doesn't always know that. And as you can see, there have been tensions in previous cabinets, not just Liberals, where there's been a fight between loyalty and policy, if you want to describe it that way. And he wants doers too. I mean, there's also, I'll just use the Newfoundland example. I find this really fascinating. So there's only one Liberal government in Canada right now at the provincial level. It's Dr. Fury's in Newfoundland and Labrador. They have a very good relationship with Prime Minister Trudeau. So, you know, he's sending a message there too, putting two Newfoundlanders in cabinet, as I say, for the first time in 40 years that is happening. So you're looking at things like that. What other messages can I send about loyalty and commitment and regional diversity? And there's so much politics that goes into this, Peter, and the symbolism of it all that they want to showcase. This government has generally been good on symbols, but sometimes it gets itself in trouble on symbols. So ministers from particular regions, heritage is a great example. Where's that going to go today? Susan clearly knows right now, but often it goes to Quebec because of the cultural dimension there. But a minister in Quebec, if it doesn't, what does that mean? And what does it say? Does it maybe go to Marcy and one of the Canada AM cabinet because of the prominence of culture and heritage in Ontario and the film industry? So you're looking for all of these things. Everybody who's looking at this today is looking for a message that's directed at them, and the government is very conscious of what messages they're trying to transmit on a day like today.
Right. Kim, let me hear your thoughts on that.
So one of the things I'm actually quite interested to see is the amount of parliamentary secretaries that are now coming into cabinet. It does, you know, you look at those folks like Helena Jasic, who was an Ontario cabinet minister, did a lot of work in the last term federally to sort of get her federal sea legs under her. You know, so to speak, and it really does show the reward for hard work. There are a lot of people who look at parliamentary secretary roles as lesser, and in fact, they can often be really great work developing stakeholders, developing policy, developing that really robust network, and a really good partnership with their ministers. There's also what we'll see from the committee structures, who will be on them, how can they work with their colleagues in a minority parliament across the board. I think there's a lot that can be done and should be done, and we've seen minority parliaments that can work for Canadians. I mean, the entire reason we have the Canada Health Act is because of a minority parliament. And so these things can be done, should be done, and that's what I'll be looking to not only today from the signals of the ministers and the portfolios, but as we look at parliamentary secretaries, as we look at cabinet committees, as we look at committees across Parliament, and really those mandate letters. What is the directive that's going to be, and how can they achieve them? So those are the kind of the nuances that we'll get to as we look to the days and weeks ahead. But I think there's also a reward in this room at Rideau Hall of people who have leaned in and put their shoulder to doing the hard work of learning to govern.
There's a lot of, Susan, a lot of speculation as we stand by for the ceremony to begin. I'll just warn that I may have to jump in and stop our conversation abruptly once it gets underway. A lot of speculation that this Prime Minister doesn't plan to seek another mandate. So And so people look at that and say, okay, this could be, as Tim touched on earlier, if this is the cabinet for the next 2 years or a year plus, on the assumption that maybe he's not going to stick around past, a couple of years and then look for a successor to take over. Should we read any? How do we consider that idea with the people we see named today?
Well, first of all, Justin Trudeau just got elected for his third mandate, which not very many prime ministers in the country have been able to do. So I don't think he's going anywhere yet. But I think it's fair to assume that he may not stay through and run for a fourth term. I think there are many able ministers that have been put into cabinet, and it will be up to them to decide who may throw their name in for a future leadership race. We know at some point there will be a leadership race because leaders don't stay forever. And whether I think many of those names could come from the cabinet table, there could be many external names. So ministers will have experience that can take them into the next election. Ministers will have experience that could, inform them as if they become leader of the party and leader of the government. But your portfolio does not necessarily dictate or restrict your capacity to lead the party and to lead the country. The Prime Minister went from opposition, never having been in cabinet, to leading. Same with Stephen Harper. So cabinet experience does not necessarily equate prime ministerial experience. It helps, but the more experience everybody has, the better.
All right, Tim, what are your thoughts on that? And what is there a connection between some of the people possibly named to this cabinet, perhaps leadership ambitions, the timing of the Prime Minister's departure? Is that horizon a little bit too long?
No, I don't think that horizon's a little bit too long. I think any good leader tries to nurture and grow other leaders. I think certainly that has been the case. If you've watched what the Prime Minister at least has done with Chrystia Freeland, she's demonstrated that she's performed well in different portfolios. She's been given more responsibility. She was the first person the Prime Minister signaled to the Canadian public, announced to the Canadian public that would be going back into cabinet in the same role. Good leaders, whether they be in government or not, are always looking to do that. I do think we will see some more jockeying because, as Susan said, I mean, it is his third term. He has probably more days behind him than he does in front of him. And most people who get into cabinet and do have further political ambitions will be looking to position themselves. And again, we all saw what happened in the Chrétien-Martin years when that positioning went too far and caused, among other things, the rift it did in the Liberal Party. I think the Prime Minister will be wanting to guard against that too. And that's a difficult balance because, again, his cabinet, his caucus are saying the same things we are today. Who do I line up around, and how does that impact the way you govern as well? So, and caucus reaction today is going to be interesting. I mean, I suspect there are quite a few, as there normally are in cabinet days, disappointed caucus people wondering why they're not in there, and how both the Prime Minister and potential leadership candidates in a future leadership race reach out to these people is also important.
All right, some of these names are starting to come out now. Apparently what's happened is that some of these, it's under embargo to journalists, but it looks like it was posted briefly on the government's own website and then removed in advance of the ceremony. So some of the key changes, yes, as it's confirmed, Anita Anand is moving to the Department of National Defence. Melanie Joly becomes Canada's new Minister of Foreign Affairs. Those are significant changes. Stephen Guilbeault becomes the Minister of the Environment, as we speculated, replacing Jonathan Wilkinson, who does move to natural resources. So there's some of the key big movements we are going to hear about as this process unfolds in the next little while here. Kim, let me hear you on this connection between who's in cabinet, leadership politics, and all of that.
Oh, there's always leadership politics. And I always say to people, could you imagine what the Chrétien-Martin years would have been like if Twitter existed? My goodness. It would have just been, entertaining, I suppose, on some level, but devastating, I think, to so many others. But in terms of some of the names we're seeing, Melanie Joly certainly has done so much extraordinary work in portfolios, but certainly even in the last campaign, campaigning, working on making sure that the platform was out there in a way that it could be managed. She is really going to be an interesting and extraordinary light, or should be, on the world stage, a different tone, different tenor. So I'm interested to see how that will shake out. Certainly, as we go into the Olympics, is Canada even going to the Olympics? Those types of things. So how that will unfold in the coming days and weeks, I think that does showcase that the Prime Minister is looking to what does he have in his cabinet? How can it work out well? Look, we have all seen cabinet members be full of promise on cabinet swearing-in day, and with or under the spotlight of actually being that minister in charge of these tough portfolios. I again, as I said, a bit of an optimist. I'm hopeful, but I'm also, wary enough to say, okay, so let's see what can be done here. How can this unfold? But I think that does show he has always had a lot of faith in Melanie Joly. She's a really great communicator. We'll see what she is like on the world stage, but I think it is something to be celebrated today.
All right, here's some other things we can tell you as it starts to dribble out here ahead of the formal ceremony. Carolyn Bennett is moving to a new position. She'll be Minister of Mental Health and Addictions and Associate Minister of Health. So gone as Minister of Crown and Indigenous Relations. That becomes the purview of Mark Miller, who was the Minister of Indigenous Services. And so he'll take a higher profile in that file. Marco Mendicino takes over from Bill Blair in the Department of Public Safety. Other sort of keynotes to point out here. All right, so look, the ceremony is about to get underway. So listen, thank you all. We'll touch base again shortly. Appreciate it. And process underway. So here we go. Thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
Throughout the ceremony. As a reminder, could you also ensure that your cell phones are turned off? Thank you. Bonjour et soyez les bienvenus à Rideau Hall. Avant de commencer la cérémonie, j'aimerais vous informer que notre photographe officiel prendra les photos lors de l'événement et qu'elles vous seront partagées dans les jours à venir. Par conséquent, je vous demanderai de ne pas prendre des photos pendant la cérémonie. J'aimerais également vous rappeler d'éteindre vos téléphones cellulaires. Merci. The ceremony will now begin with the entrance of the Secretary to the Governor-General, Ian McCowan, the Interim Clerk of the Privy Council, Janice Charette, and the Assistant Clerk of the Privy Council, Julie Adair. La cérémonie débutera maintenant avec l'arrivée du secrétaire de la gouverneure générale, Ian McCowan, de la greffière du Conseil privé par intérim, Janice Charette, et de la greffière adjointe du Conseil privé, Julie Adair.
Good afternoon. To begin today's swearing-in ceremony, I invite you to welcome the ministers and ministers-designate, the Prime Minister of Canada, Madame Grégoire Trudeau, and the Governor-General of Canada, and Mr. Fraser. Bonjour. Pour lancer la cérémonie d'assermentation, veuillez accueillir les ministres et les ministres désignés, le Premier ministre du Canada, Madame Grégoire Trudeau, et la Gouverneure générale du Canada, et Monsieur Fraser. Please be seated. Voulez-vous asseoir? I'd like to take a moment to share with you a traditional activity that was initiated just prior to the beginning of the ceremony. The lighting of the kulik, the traditional Inuit lamp. The lamp is used in the north to bring light and warmth to the home. We light the kulik to mark important events, such as today's ceremony. We are very grateful for the presence of Sally Webster, an Inuk elder from Baker Lake, who lit the kulik and will maintain its light and warmth throughout the ceremony. Nakarmik. J'aimerais maintenant prendre un moment pour vous présenter un élément traditionnel qui s'est tenu avant le début de cette cérémonie. L'allumage du kulik, la lampe traditionnelle inuite. Cette lampe est utilisée dans le nord pour apporter lumière et chaleur à la demeure. Nous allumons le kulik lors d'événements importants, comme la cérémonie d'aujourd'hui. Nous sommes reconnaissants de la présence de Sally Webster, une aînée inuite de Baker Lake qui a allumé le kulik et qui veillera sur sa lumière et sa chaleur tout au long de la cérémonie. Nakarmik. To officially begin our ceremony, I invite Algonquin Anishinaabe Elder Claudette Commanda to offer words of welcome. For over 30 years, Elder Commanda has promoted First Nations people, history, culture as a student, educator, and advocate. Pour commencer officiellement notre cérémonie, j'invite l'aînée Algonquin Anishinaabe, Claudette Commanda, à prononcer ces mots de bienvenue. Depuis plus de 30 ans, l'aînée Commanda fait la promotion des peuples, de l'histoire et de la culture de Premières Nations en tant qu'étudiante, éducatrice et défenseur.
My heart is it's filled with so much love at this moment. Your Excellencies, Prime Minister Trudeau, Madame Trudeau, elders, Indigenous leaders, members of Parliament, members of the Senate, distinguished guests, family and friends. Pijajikoma Anishinaabe aki o mamawininiwag. Bienvenue au territoire non cédé de mes ancêtres, nous peuple, la nation algonquin. I welcome you to this beautiful, unceded homeland of our ancestors, our people, the Algonquin Nation. We come together in this circle with one love, one prayer, and we offer it to the Creator, and we say, Chimi Gwedj Gishiminado Kina Keego. We thank the Creator for all His blessings. My prayer for all who are here is that the Creator blesses you, Minopamadzuin, Nibuksendam Minopamadzuin, Nibuksendam Mashkawiziwin, that the Creator blesses you with strength and good health. We come together in a community of friends and families and colleagues with one heart, one love, as we raise our prayer to the Creator and we ask that He blesses those who will have the responsibility and titles as ministers, to bless you with strength. And I ask the Creator that the great gift that He will give you is that you understand You embrace and you walk daily with the 7 grandfathers. Wisdom, love, respect, honesty, courage, humility, and truth. And let us come together, brothers and sisters. Let us raise our voice in our heart with love, and together, let us say together that we acknowledge the ancestors, that we honor the children of yesteryear, today, and tomorrow. For indeed, we all know that children are sacred, and we have a responsibility to love and to care and to ensure that all children matter. And let us together say, miigwech, merci, thank you.
Thank you, Elder Commanda. Merci, Année Commanda. Ms. Janice Charette, Interim Clerk of the Privy Council, will now seek the Governor-General's consent to proceed. Madame Janice Charette, greffière du Conseil privé par intérim, demandera maintenant à la Gouverneure générale la permission de procéder. With the Governor-General's approval, we will now proceed with the swearing-in of members of the 29th Canadian Ministry. Maintenant que la Gouverneure générale a signifié son approbation, nous procéderons à l'assermentation des membres du 29e Conseil des ministres canadiens. The members of the Queen's Privy Council for Canada who are retaining their responsibilities will please come forward for presentation to the Governor-General. Les membres du Conseil privé de la Reine pour le Canada qui maintiennent leurs responsabilités sont invités à s'avancer pour être présentés à la Gouverneure générale. The Honourable Chrystia Freeland, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. L'Honorable Chrystia Freeland, Vice-Première ministre et Ministre des Finances. The Honourable Lawrence Macaulay, Minister of Veterans Affairs and Associate Minister of National Defence. L'Honorable Lawrence Macaulay, Ministre des Anciens Combattants et Ministre associé de la Défense nationale. L'Honorable Marie-Claude Bibeau, Ministre de l'Agriculture et de l'Agroalimentaire. The Honourable Marie-Claude Bibeau, the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food.
The Honourable Diane Leboutillier, Minister of National Revenue.
The Honourable Diane Leboutillier, Minister of National Revenue. The Honourable Carla Qualtrough, Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Disability Inclusion.
The Honourable Carla Qualtrough, Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Disability Inclusion.
Big smile.
The Honourable François-Philippe Champagne, Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry.
The Honourable François-Philippe Champagne, Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry. The Honourable Mary F.Y. Ng, Minister of International Trade, Export Promotion, Small Business and Economic Development.
The Honourable Mary F.Y. Ng, Minister of International Trade, Export Promotion, Small Business and Economic Development.
The Honourable David Lametti, Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada.
The Honourable David Lametti, Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada.
The Honourable Omar Al-Gabra, Minister of Transport, Lana.
The Honourable Omar Al-Gabra, Minister of Transport.
The members of the Queen's Privy Council for Canada who are assuming new responsibilities will please come forward to be sworn into office.
The members of the Queen's Privy Council for Canada who are assuming new responsibilities will please come forward to be sworn to office.
The Honourable Carolyn Bennett, Minister of Mental Health and Addictions and Associate Minister of Health. Lana.
The Honourable Carolyn Bennett, Minister of Mental Health and Addictions and Associate Minister of Health.
I, Carolyn Bennett,
do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully and to the best of my skill and knowledge execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Mental Health and Addictions and Associate Minister of Health. Moi, Carolyn.
I, Carolyn Bennett, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Mental Health and Addictions and Associate Minister of Health.
L'honorable Dominique Leblanc, ministre des Affaires intergouvernementales, de l'infrastructure et des collectivités. The Honorable Dominique Leblanc, Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, Infrastructure and Communities.
Moi, Dominique Leblanc, je promets et jure solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai les responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre des Affaires intergouvernementales, de l'infrastructure et des collectivités. Ainsi, Dieu me soit en aide. I, Dominique Leblanc, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, Infrastructure and Communities. So help me God.
L'Honorable Jean-Yves Duclos, Ministre de la Santé. The Honorable Jean-Yves Duclos, Minister of Health.
Moi, Jean-Yves Duclos, je promets et déclare solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre de la Santé. I, Jean-Yves Duclos, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trust reposed in me as Minister of Health.
L'Honorable Mélanie Joly, Ministre des Affaires étrangères. The Honorable Mélanie Joly, Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Moi, Mélanie Joly, je promets et déclare solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre des Affaires étrangères. I, Mélanie Joly, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Foreign Affairs. Oh my God.
The Honorable Harjit Singh Sajjan, Minister of International Development and Minister responsible for the Pacific Economic Development Agency of Canada. L'Honorable Harjit Singh Sajjan, Ministre du Développement international et Ministre responsable de l'Agence du développement économique du Pacifique Canada.
I, Harjit Singh Sajjan, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of International Development and Minister responsible for the Pacific Economic Development Agency of Canada.
The Honorable Patricia Haidu, Minister of Indigenous Services and Minister responsible for the Federal Economic Development Agency for Northern Ontario. L'Honorable Patricia Haidu, Ministre des Services aux Autochtones et Ministre responsable de l'Agence fédérale de développement économique pour le Nord de l'Ontario.
I, Patricia Haidu, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Indigenous Services and Minister responsible for the Federal Economic Development Agency for Northern Ontario. Moi, Patricia Haidu, je promets et déclare solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre de service aux Autochtones et ministre responsable de l'Agence fédérale du développement économique pour le Nord de l'Ontario.
The Honourable Karina Gould, Minister of Families, Children and Social Development. L'Honorable Karina Gould, Ministre de la Famille, des Enfants et du Développement Social.
I, Karina Gould, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Families, Children and Social Development. Moi, Karina Gould, je promets et je déclare solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre de la Famille, des Enfants et du Développement social.
The Honourable Ahmed D. Hussein, Minister of Housing and Diversity and Inclusion. L'Honorable Ahmed D. Hussein, Ministre du Logement et de la Diversité et de l'Inclusion.
Moi, Ahmed D. Hussein, je promets et jure solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre du Logement et de la Diversité et de l'Inclusion. I, Ahmed D. Hussein, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Housing and Diversity and Inclusion. So help me God.
The Honourable Seamus O'Regan, Minister of Labour. L'Honourable Seamus O'Regan, Ministre du Travail.
I, Seamus O'Regan, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Labour. Moi, Seamus O'Regan, je promets et déclare solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre du Travail.
L'Honorable Pablo Rodriguez, Ministre de Patrimoine Canadien. The Honorable Pablo Rodriguez, Minister of Canadian Heritage.
Moi, Pablo Rodriguez, je promets et jure solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et que je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre du patrimoine canadien, ainsi que Dieu vienne m'en aide. I, Pablo Rodriguez, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trust reposed in me as Minister of Canadian Heritage. So help me God.
L'Honorable Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor, ministre des langues officielles et ministre responsable de l'Agence de promotion économique du Canada Atlantique. The Honorable Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor, Minister of Official Languages and Minister responsible for the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency.
Moi, Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor, je promets et jure solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs qui m'acquitteraient des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre des langues officielles et ministre responsable de l'Agence de promotion économique du Canada Atlantique. Ainsi, Dieu me soit en aide. I, Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skills and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Official Languages and Minister responsible for the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency. So help me God.
President of the Queen's Privy Council for Canada and Minister of Emergency Preparedness. L'Honorable William Sterling Blair, Président du Conseil privé de la Reine pour le Canada et Ministre de la Protection civile.
I, William Sterling Blair, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts proposed in me as President of the Queen's Privy Council for Canada and as Minister of Emergency Preparedness. So help me God.
The Honourable Philomena Tassé, Minister of Public Services and Procurement. L'Honorable Philomena Tassé, Ministre des Services Publics et de l'Approvisionnement.
I, Philomena Tassé, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Public Services and Procurement, so help me God. Moi, Philomena Tassé, je promets et jure, solennellement et sincèrement, qu'au mieux de mes compétences et de mes connaissances, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités comme m'ont été confiées en qualité le ministre des Services publics et de l'Approvisionnement. Ainsi Dieu me soit en aide.
The Honourable Jonathan Wilkinson, Minister of Natural Resources. L'Honourable Jonathan Wilkinson, Ministre des Ressources Naturelles.
Moi, Jonathan Wilkinson, je promets et jure solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre des Ressources naturelles. Ainsi Dieu me soit en aide. I, Jonathan Wilkinson, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Natural Resources, so help me God.
The Honourable Joyce Catherine Murray, Minister of Fisheries, Oceans and the Canadian Coast Guard. L'Honourable Joyce Catherine Murray, Ministre des Pêches, des Océans et de la Garde côtière canadienne.
I, Joyce Catherine Murray, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Fisheries, Oceans, and the Canadian Coast Guard. Moi, Joyce Catherine Murray, je promets et déclare solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je me quitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre des Pêches, des Océans et de la Garde côtière canadienne.
Indira Anita Anand, Minister of National Defense. L'Honorable Indira Anita Anand, Ministre de la Défense nationale.
I, Indira Anita Anand, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of National Defense. So help me God. Moi, Indira Anita Anand, je promets et jure solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre de la Défense nationale. Ainsi Dieu me soit en aide.
L'Honorable Mona Fortier, Présidente du Conseil du Trésor. The Honorable Mona Fortier, President of the Treasury Board.
Moi, Mona Fortier, je promets et déclare solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de présidente du Conseil du Trésor. I, Mona Fortier, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as President of the Treasury Board.
Stephen Guilbeault, ministre de l'Environnement et du Changement climatique. The Honorable Stephen Guilbeault, Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Moi, Stephen Guilbeault, je promets et déclare solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre de l'Environnement et du Changement climatique. I, Stephen Guilbeault, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trust reposed in me as Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
The Honourable Marco E.L. Mendicino, Minister of Public Safety. L'Honorable Marco E.L. Mendicino, Ministre de la Sécurité Publique.
I, Marco Mendicino, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully and to the best of my skill and knowledge execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Public Safety, so help me God. Moi, Marco Mendicino, je promets et je jure solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je me quitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre de la Sécurité publique. Ainsi Dieu me soit en aide.
The Honourable Mark Miller, Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations. L'Honourable Mark Miller, Ministre des Relations Couronne Autochtones.
Moi, Mark Miller, je promets et jure solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre des Relations couronnes autochtones. Ainsi Dieu me soit en aide. I, Mark Miller, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully and to the best of my skill and knowledge execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations. So help me God.
The Honourable Danielle Vandal, Minister of Northern Affairs, Minister responsible for Prairies Economic Development Canada, and Minister responsible for the Canadian Northern Economic Development Agency. L'Honorable Danielle Vandal, Ministre des Affaires du Nord, Ministre responsable du Développement économique Canada pour les Prairies et Ministre responsable de l'Agence canadienne de développement économique du Nord.
I, Daniel Vandal, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trust reposed in me as Minister of Northern Affairs, Minister responsible for Prairies Economic Development Canada, and Minister responsible for the Canadian North Economic Development Agency. Moi, Daniel Vandal, je promets et déclare solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai les responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre des Affaires du Nord, ministre responsable du développement économique Canada pour les prairies et ministre responsable de l'Agence canadienne de développement économique du Nord.
The Honourable Mark Holland, Leader of the Government in the House of Commons. L'Honorable Mark Holland, Leader du gouvernement à la Chambre des communes.
I, Mark Holland, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trust reposed in me as Leader of the Government in the House of Commons. Moi, Mark Holland, je promets et déclare solennement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'occuperai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées de qualité de leader du gouvernement à la Chambre des communes.
Now, Alicia Bloor, a Métis fiddler and member of Fiddle Stories Elder Youth Legacy Project, joined by her brother, guitarist Liam Bloor, will now come forward to share their music with us. Alicia Bloor, une violoniste métisse et membre de Fiddle Stories Elder Youth Legacy Project, ainsi que son frère, le guitariste Liam Bloor, vont maintenant nous faire découvrir leur musique. Thank you, Alicia and Liam. Merci, Alicia et Liam. The ministers designate who are not members of the Queen's Privy Council for Canada will please come forward to take the oath of allegiance, the Privy Councillor's oath, and the oath of office. Les ministres désignés qui ne sont pas membres du Conseil privé de la Reine pour le Canada sont priés de s'avancer pour prêter le serment d'allégeance, le serment conseiller privé et le serment d'office. Mr. Randy Paul Andrew Boissonneau, Minister of Tourism and Associate Minister of Finance. Monsieur Randy Paul Andrew Boissonneau, Ministre du Tourisme et Ministre associé des Finances.
I, Randy Paul Andrew Boissonneau, do declare that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Canada, her heirs and successors. Moi, Randy Paul Andrew Boissonneau, je déclare fidélité et sincère allégeance à Sa Majesté la Reine Elizabeth II, Reine du Canada, à ses héritiers et successeurs. I, Randy Paul Andrew Boissonneau, do solemnly and sincerely declare that I shall be a true and faithful servant to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II as a member of Her Majesty's Privy Council for Canada. I will in all things to be treated, debated, and resolved in Privy Council, faithfully, honestly, and truly declare my mind and my opinion. I shall keep secret all matters committed and revealed to me in this capacity, or that shall be secretly treated of in council. Generally, in all things, I shall do as a faithful and true servant ought to for Her Majesty. Moi, Randy Paul Andrew Boissonneau, je déclare solennellement et sincèrement que j'agirai en fidèle et loyal serviteur de Sa Majesté la Reine Élisabeth II, en ma qualité de membre du Conseil privé de Sa Majesté pour le Canada. J'exprimerai fidèlement, honnêtement et en toute vérité mon sentiment et mon opinion sur toute chose traitée, débattue et résolue en Conseil. Je tiendrai secret tout ce que m'y sera confié ou révélé en cette qualité ou tout ce dont il sera traité secrètement en Conseil. J'agirai en toutes circonstances comme il convient à un fidèle et loyal serviteur de Sa Majesté. I, Randy Paul Andrew Boissonneau, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully and to the best of my skill and knowledge execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Tourism and Associate Minister of Finance. Moi, Randy Paul Andrew Boissonneau, je promets et déclare solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre du Tourisme et ministre associé des Finances.
Mr. Sean Simon Andrew Fraser, Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. Monsieur Sean Simon Andrew Fraser, Ministre de l'Immigration, des Réfugiés et de la Citoyenneté.
Sean Simon Andrew Fraser, do declare that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Canada, her heirs and successors. Moi, Sean Simon Andrew Fraser, je déclare fidélité et sincère allégeance à Sa Majesté la Reine Elizabeth II, Reine du Canada, à ses héritières et successeurs. I, Sean Simon Andrew Fraser, do solemnly and sincerely declare that I shall be a true and faithful servant to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II as a member of Her Majesty's Privy Council for Canada. I will in all things to be treated, debated and resolved in Privy Council faithfully, honestly, and truly declare my mind and my opinion. I shall keep secret all matters committed and revealed to me in this capacity, or that shall be secretly treated of in Council. Generally, in all things I shall do as a faithful and true servant ought to do for Her Majesty. Moi, Sean Simon Andrew Fraser, je déclare solennellement et sincèrement que j'agirai en fidèle et loyal serviteur de Sa Majesté la Reine Elizabeth II, en ma qualité de membre du Conseil privé de Sa Majesté pour le Canada. J'exprimerai fidèlement, honnêtement et en toute vérité mon sentiment et mon opinion sur toutes choses traitées, débattues et résolues en Conseil. Je tiendrai secret tout ce qui me sera confié ou révélé en cette qualité, ou tout ce dont il sera traité secrètement en Conseil. J'agirai en toutes circonstances comme il convient à un fidèle et loyal serviteur de Sa Majesté. One more. I, Sean Simon Andrew Fraser, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trust reposed in me as Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. Moi, Sean Simon Andrew Fraser, je promets et déclare solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de mes compétences et de mes connaissances, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre de l'Immigration, des Réfugiés et de la Citoyenneté. Merci.
Ms. Gudrid Ida Hutchings, Minister of Rural Economic Development. Madame Gudrid Ida Hutchings, Ministre du Développement économique rural.
I, Gudrid Ida Hutchings, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Canada, her heirs and successors, so help me God. I, Gudrid Ida Hutchings, do solemnly and sincerely swear that I shall be a true and faithful servant to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II as a member of Her Majesty's Privy Council for Canada. I will in all things to be treated, debated, and resolved in Privy Council faithfully, honestly, and truly declare my mind and my opinion. I shall keep secret all matters committed and revealed to me in this capacity, or that shall be secretly treated in Council. Generally, in all things, I shall do as a faithful and true servant ought to do for Her Majesty. So help me God. And I, Gudrid Ida Hutchings, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Rural Economic Development. So help me God. Thank you.
Ms. Marcy Ian, Minister for Women and Gender Equality and Youth. Madame Marcy Ian, Ministre des Femmes et de l'Égalité des Genres et de la Jeunesse.
I, Marcy Ian, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Canada, her heirs and successors, so help me God. Moi, Marcy Ian, je jure fidélité et sincère allégeance à Sa Majesté la Reine Elizabeth II, Reine du Canada et ses héritières et successeurs, ainsi Dieu me soit honnête. I, Marcy Ian, do solemnly and sincerely swear that I shall be a true and faithful servant to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II as a member of Her Majesty's Privy Council for Canada. I will in all things be treated, debated, and resolved in Privy Council faithfully, honestly, and truly declare my mind and my opinion. I shall keep secret all matters committed and revealed to me in this capacity, or that shall be secretly treated of in Council. Generally, in all things I shall do as a faithful and true servant ought to do for Her Majesty. So help me God. Moi, Marcy Ian, je jure solennellement et sincèrement que je agrée en fidèle et loyale serviture de Sa Majesté la Reine Elizabeth II, en ma qualité de membre du Conseil privé de Sa Majesté pour le Canada. J'exprimerai fidèlement, honnêtement et en toute vérité mon sentiment et mon opinion sur toutes choses traitées, débattue et résolues en Conseil. Je tiendrai secret tout ce qui me sera confié ou révélé en cette qualité ou tout ce dont il sera traité secrètement en Conseil. J'agirai en toutes circonstances comme il convient en une fidèle et loyale serviteur de Sa Majesté. Ainsi Dieu me soit honnête. I, Marcy Ian, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully and to the best of my skill and knowledge execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister for Women and Gender, Equality, and Youth, so help me God. Moi, Marcy Ian, je promets et jure solemnement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre des Femmes et de l'égalité des genres et de la jeunesse. Ainsi Dieu me soit honnête.
Ms. Helena Josic, Minister responsible for the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario. Madame Helena Josic, Ministre responsable de l'Agence fédérale de développement économique pour le Sud de l'Ontario.
I, Helena Jasic, do declare that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Canada, her heirs and successors. Moi, Helena Jasic, je déclare fidélité et sincère allégeance à Sa Majesté la Reine Elizabeth II, Reine du Canada, à ses héritiers et successeurs. I, Helena Jazyk, do solemnly and sincerely declare that I shall be a true and faithful servant to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II as a member of Her Majesty's Privy Council for Canada. I will, in all things to be treated, debated, and resolved in Privy Council, faithfully, honestly, and truly declare my mind and my opinion. I shall keep secret all matters committed and revealed to me in this capacity, or that shall be secretly treated of in Council. Generally, in all things, I shall do as a faithful and true servant ought to do for Her Majesty. Moi, Helena Jazyk, je déclare solennellement et sincèrement que j'agirai en fidèle et loyal serviteur de Sa Majesté la Reine Élisabeth II, en ma qualité de membre du Conseil privé de Sa Majesté pour le Canada. J'exprimerai fidèlement, honnêtement et en toute vérité mon sentiment et mon opinion sur toutes choses traitées, débattues et résolues en Conseil. Je tiendrai secret tout ce qui me sera confié ou révélé en cette qualité, ou tout ce dont il sera traité secrètement en Conseil. J'agirai en toutes circonstances comme il convient à un fidèle et loyal serviteur de Sa Majesté. I, Helena Jazyk, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister responsible for the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario. Moi, Helena Jazyk, je promets et déclare solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre responsable de l'Agence fédérale de développement économique pour le sud de l'Ontario.
Ms. Kamal Kara, Minister of Seniors. Madame Kamal Kara, Ministre des Aînés.
I, Kamal Kara, do declare that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Canada, her heirs and successors. I, Kamal Kara, do solemnly and sincerely declare that I shall be a true and faithful servant to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II as a member of Her Majesty's Privy Council for Canada. I will in all things to be treated, debated, and resolved in Privy Council faithfully, honestly, and truly declare my mind and my opinion. I shall keep secret all matters committed and revealed to me in this capacity, or shall be secretly treated of in Council. Generally, in all things, I shall do as a faithful and true servant ought to do for Her Majesty. I, Kamal Kara, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trust reposed in me as Minister of Seniors.
Madame Pascale Saint-Onge, ministre des Sports et ministre responsable de l'Agence de développement économique du Canada pour les régions du Québec. Ms. Pascale Saint-Onge, Minister of Sport and Minister responsible for the Economic Development Agency of Canada for the regions of Quebec.
Moi, Pascale Saint-Onge, je déclare fidélité et sincère allégeance à Sa Majesté la Reine Élisabeth II, Reine du Canada, à ses héritiers et successeurs. Moi, Pascale Saint-Onge, je déclare solennellement et sincèrement que j'agirai en fidèle et loyal serviteur de Sa Majesté la Reine Élisabeth II en ma qualité de membre du Conseil privé de Sa Majesté pour le Canada. J'exprimerai fidèlement, honnêtement et en toute vérité mon sentiment et mon opinion sur toute chose traitée, débattue et résolue en Conseil. Je tiendrai secret tout ce qui me sera confié ou révélé en cette qualité ou tout ce dont il sera traité secrètement en Conseil. J'agirai en toutes circonstances comme il convient à un fidèle et loyal serviteur de Sa Majesté. Moi, Pascale Saint-Onge, je promets et déclare solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui me sont confiées en qualité de ministre des Sports et ministre responsable de l'Agence de développement économique du Canada pour les régions du Québec.
The Governor-General, the Prime Minister, and the Interim Clerk of the Privy Council will now sign the oath registry to formally witness the swearing-in of ministers. La Gouverneure générale, le Premier ministre et la greffière du Conseil privé par intérim apposeront maintenant leur signature sur le registre des serments pour attester officiellement l'assermentation des ministres. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please rise and join singer-songwriter Kimberly Sungstrom in the singing of the national anthem, and remain in your places for the departure of Their Excellencies, the Prime Minister and Madame Grégoire Trudeau. Mesdames et Messieurs, veuillez vous lever et joindre vos voix à celles de Kimberly Sungstrom interprète et compositrice, pour chanter l'hymne national. Et veuillez demeurer à vos places pour le départ de leurs excellences, du Premier ministre et de Mme Grégoire Trudeau. Merci de votre participation à cette cérémonie. Thank you for being with us today.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, thy true north strong and free. Ton histoire est une épopée